The path to ill health is paved on hyperglycemia. My name is Dr. Dwight Lundell. I spent a good part of my adult life in the cardiac operating room doing heart surgery. I was lucky enough to be in the very first class of the medical school at the University of Arizona. When I was there was not much we could do for people with heart attacks. We had a few crude medicines, but they had this brand new operation called a coronary bypass came along. Well, it just fascinated me, number one, to take over the circulation, and number two, to be able to return someone to their family, to their work, to their life, prolong their life, and sometimes save their life. And so this captivated me, and after finishing general surgery training at the University of Arizona, I went to Yale University in Connecticut to finish cardiac surgery training. And I came back to Arizona and went to work doing coronary bypass operations. Ultimately, over the 25 years, I did over 5,000 coronary bypass operations. I did hundreds of valve operations. This nice carbon valve and tissue valves and aneurysms, and has side effects. About 50 to 60% of people have temporary cognitive impairment. 2.5 to 5% of people have a stroke afterwards. So some of us began to ask, can we do better? Is there a way that we can improve this process? Can we do a coronary bypass without using the heart-lung machine? And with the help of this cute little device, which we helped industry do, we could lift the end of the heart up and do the blood vessels on the backside, so we could do a complete revascularization, fix all the blockages without using the heart-lung machine. This was very satisfying to me. My partner and I did 1,000 consecutive cases without a single intraoperative stroke. Doing all these surgeries every day. I didn't care really what caused heart disease. I just didn't care. If you had it and you were in trouble, I could fix it. So, to me, everything was right. But over the years, I began to be a little troubled. I noticed that in spite of all my cardiology friends preaching about cholesterol, that most of my patients had normal cholesterol levels. Even when they'd come back 10 years later sometimes for another operation, because the grafts had plugged up, they still had normal cholesterol. So it didn't quite make sense. And I began to study and learn and do the best I could to try to find out what's going on. I made the observation in the operating room, looking down at the coronary artery, that there was redness and swelling around the plaque area. Well, these are two of the cardinal signs of inflammation. So I began to wonder if inflammation was part of this. Well, people smarter than me also were wondering if that was part of it. And they did a lot of work. There's a man by the name of Russell Ross, who was a real student of vascular biology, and over the years worked very hard to prove that inflammation was the mechanism whereby plaque built up in the artery. He published this article in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1999. Sadly, he died shortly thereafter, of cancer. But he was a great student, and this article laid out in detail the biochemical and the cellular mechanisms whereby inflammation caused arteriosclerosis. Now, maybe the most prolific authors about inflammation and atherosclerosis were Peter Libby and Paul Ridker from Harvard. And they published in the lay press, and they published in the scientific literature many articles about, once again, reiterating the biochemical and cellular mechanisms whereby plaque built up in the blood vessels and ultimately caused stroke or heart attack or limb loss. So the steps were very well worked out. And so this was a shift in our knowledge about coronary disease. But to me, the sad thing is that what was the question that Ridker and Libby asked? They didn't ask what's causing this inflammation. They asked what medication can we use to get rid of the inflammation or reduce it. They asked the question, is the statin medications, which we believe are going to cure heart disease, do they have an effect on inflammation? So the real risk is very, very slightly reduced, even under the best of circumstances. And once again, in spite of all of the authorities assuring us that coronary disease was going to be cured with the advent of statin treatments, this study published in 2009 demonstrates that of 136,000 patients admitted to hospital with coronary disease, heart attack, had normal cholesterol, 70% of them. So the theory that cholesterol causes heart disease and is maybe correct only 30% of the time doesn't make very much sense to me. So, but once again, they said, well, maybe we need lower levels. Maybe we need to get your cholesterol even lower. So there was a mantra that went around in the cardiology community, lower is better. Of course, that was a marketing ploy by Pfizer and the other people that make statins. The interesting thing is that cholesterol was labeled as a surrogate marker for heart disease. Your doctor, sincere as they may be, will insist that you need to get your statin drug if your cholesterol level is elevated. Well, there are a few researchers, and getting to be more and more, who are questioning this. Now, it took 30 years of statin treatments before we admitted that they actually cause diabetes in a certain number of people. 1 in 50 people on a statin will get new onset type 2 diabetes. I have never been a believer in cholesterol. I don't think it's the marker. Based on the literature, I'm more and more convinced every day that it is not the cause of heart disease. It is a marker for something. It's a marker for eating too much carbohydrate. If you want to raise your LDL, eat lots of carbohydrates. If you want to lower your LDL, eat lots of saturated fat and lower your carbohydrates. Simple as that. Dave Feldman on the Cholesterol Code has done some interesting experiments on himself and proved that his high-fat diet took his cholesterol LDL to very low levels. More and more studies and a re-examination of the old studies of replacing saturated fat with vegetable oils shows that the vegetable oils actually make us worse than eating saturated fat. They thought I was a big threat to the revenue stream, even though I was producing most of it. And so after a little while of beating my head against the wall, I said, I'm going to go prove that I can reduce the so-called risk factors of heart disease by changing diet. And I closed my successful surgical practice and opened a clinic that was focused on weight loss and focused on low carbohydrate nutrition. Now, weight loss was sort of a side effect. To my delight, we could reduce all the diabetic medicines. Everybody came off their insulin relatively quickly. Most of them came off their oral medications very quickly. The lipid panels improved, if that even is a risk factor for heart disease, but they improved, they got better. So this was pretty dramatic proof to me that I was correct and that some others were correct, that low carbohydrate nutrition was the way to prevent heart disease and lots of other degenerative conditions. It's sugar. And the most prominent example of people with high blood sugars is what? It's diabetics. People with type 2 diabetics, of which there is an epidemic and which will overwhelm the healthcare systems in every modern country in the world if we don't begin to do something about it. It's sugar. So what happens to diabetics over time? They go blind, they lose their kidneys, we amputate their legs, they have severe neuropathies, and they have kidney failure, and they die of heart disease. It's the same old heart disease that everybody gets, and yet they had normal cholesterols. So really that's the basic mechanism of heart disease. Not cholesterol, not salt, sugar. Sugar. The most powerful health tool is not a treadmill, It's not a weight machine, it's a glucometer. The path to ill health is paved on hyperglycemia. So once again, if you want to be healthy, control that blood sugar, stop eating the standard American diet, get yourself on a reduced low carbohydrate diet with extra healthy saturated fat and a moderate amount of protein. That's the key to health. Low carbohydrate nutrition is the key to health. So thank you very much.